Okay, we're ready to resume the public hearing. I did get one piece of advice during the break, and that was for everybody that's talking into the mic to get up to the mic so we don't get any feedback. So that goes for everybody on the commission too. Anyway, we're going to now hear testimony from the Pechanga, and we're going to start with Courtney Coyle, and she has 10 minutes if we can find her folks out here. Let's see what we got. Luciano Alganez. Luciano, are you there? Oh, okay. Here. Ann Woodward. Okay. Michael, might be Vasquez. Okay. And Johnny Vasquez. Johnny? Where? Oh, you're almost so far away that I can't see it, but that's all right. You got 10 minutes, Ms. Coyle.
My name is Courtney Coyle. I'm an attorney in private practice in San Diego representing the Pechanga Band of Luiseno Indians. My practice has evolved over the last 20 years to principally representing tribal governments in Southern California in protecting their sacred places, burial grounds, and cultural practices. This is what I do. My firm got the proposed Glamis gold mine in Imperial County denied by the United States. This was the first time a large-scale hard rock mining permit was ever denied under the mining law of 1872. The denial was based on the devastating impacts to tribal cultural and aesthetic values that would have occurred with that mine. It has been 10 years since that denial of the mine, and there is still no mine there today. I submit that many of the same issues are at stake here with this proposed quarry. Today, I'd first like to set the framework for the tribe's technical testimony. You already heard from Tribal Chairman Macaro that the quarry's impact to the Pechanga people would be unacceptable. You will hear from the tribe's technical team in detail why this project must be denied, including the so-called reduced quarry footprint alternative, which does nothing to lessen the tribe's concerns. Then, as time allows, I will go into the legal bases why, under CEQA, there should be many red flags apparent to you that it would be an abuse of discretion should the project's environmental documents be approved because many of the EIR's determinations, conclusions, and findings are not supported by substantial evidence, and because the county did not comply with all the procedures governing EIR review. You will hear today from the tribe's cultural, environmental, legal, and GIS departments, and from council members including Anna Hoover, who will read a statement from Dr. Tom King, the national expert in traditional cultural properties, who wrote the book, in support of listing this historic property under CEQA in the National Register of Historic Places. Next, Raymond Vasquez Jr., tribal member, will provide a reading of the Luiseno creation story centered upon the area at issue. Dr. Lisa Woodward will then speak to the extensive written ethnographic history supporting the sacredness of the Luiseno ancestral origin landscape that includes the project area, which shows that the tribe's cultural concerns are independently verifiable. Attorney and tribal member Laura Miranda will then speak to the county's failure to consult with Pechanga on a government-to-government basis at each step, on the archaeological technical reports, EIR, and the final EIR, and she will outline several material mischaracterizations of the record by the EIR preparers. The tribe's GIS department will then show how the EIR, in many instances, provided inaccurate information, failed to follow standard industry practices, and omitted or artificially reduced the project's impacts to the Pechanga community. Next, Cindy Smallwood and Helen Waku will speak to the many environmental concerns of the community of Pechanga that have been omitted from consideration in the EIR, as well as the failures of the EIR in several instances to follow standard industry methodologies. Councilmember Perez will speak to the economic and social benefits that Pechanga and its enterprises bring to Temecula and the county as a whole, which show the tribe's contributions must be included in any economic analysis or statement of overriding considerations. Councilmember Maciel will speak to the many resolutions from other tribal governments sharing Pechanga's concerns. Cultural coordinator and tribal member Paul McCarl will speak to the religious and cultural values of the origin landscape and detail the devastating cultural impacts should your commission approve this quarry. And finally, tribal chairman Mark McCarl will offer concluding remarks. In sum, this testimony will show that the Pechanga community is undisputedly not better off with the mine than without it. You will hear the quarry will destroy a sacred mountain and is not compatible adjacent use to the reservation. Regarding CEQA, this is a textbook case of how not to do a legally defensible environmental impact report. The draft EIR was seriously flawed, and the final EIR and handling of public review comments only made matters worse. Pechanga reasserts its comments on the DIR, which were extensive, and will submit its concerns about the final EIR in writing to the county. Several things raised big red flags under CEQA, including adding new substantive information to the final EIR without recirculating it for public review. This includes adding new mitigation measures that change the project description. You can see these in blue. There's several blue ones and then a white one. A new access connector, widened ramp and added way scale, northbound off-ramp widened to 2 lanes, another widened ramp, and a new non-potable water connection. These mitigation measures themselves could cause additional potential impacts to tribal cultural resources and should have been considered under CEQA Guidelines Section 15126.4A1D. These new project elements underwent new biological surveys, next slide please, and mitigation. You can see these are the areas that they surveyed for bio, yet no additional cultural surveys were performed, even though such resources are often found in right-of-ways and so-called disturbed areas. Your commission should ask why that was so. Adding 9 new appendices, including disclosing a new major visual impact to tribal lands that you will hear are to be managed for their cultural and natural values. Adding an entirely new section on the Pechanga community that misses the mark and does not address issues of concern to the tribe, which you will hear about. Other CEQA red flag issues include significant new information regarding the severity of impacts that was not disclosed in the final environmental impact report. The listing of the origin area in the state sacred lands file with the Native American Heritage Commission further demonstrates the magnitude of impacts to Pechanga. Yet this data is being improperly ignored by the county, which apparently is relying on a misplaced use of environmental baselines to justify the EIR's complete failure to address the tribe's religious concerns. The EIR also suffers from analytical gaps, showing that it cannot be relied upon by your commission. Whether you call it an historic property, a sacred place, a traditional cultural property, or a district, no analysis of impacts to the origin landscape as a whole was done in the environmental impact report or its technical appendices. The commission should ask why this critical issue does not appear in the areas of controversy section of the draft EIR. It does not appear in the final EIR, areas of controversy, even after the tribe's letters to the county. And it was not part of the county's or grant's presentations or planning department staff reports, as you'll recall from the other prior hearings. You will want to ask why you haven't been adequately briefed on this critical issue. Remarkably, the EIR itself concludes that there are no significant impacts to cultural resources, either project or cumulative. Nothing. The tribe should be happy. What's the problem? This is despite this is an area the tribe and its uniquely qualified experts on TCPs has determined is eligible for the National Register, a process that the county is obliged to work this project through the California National Registers. Despite that under the CEQA guidelines, section 15382, communities, including tribes, can offer evidence that trigger significance thresholds for impacts like these. Yet the tribe's information was summarily discarded at each step of the CEQA process and in the largely non-responsive and unsubstantiated responses to comments. Despite that this is a cultural area that the quarry's own EIR technical consultants recognized would suffer some impacts by the project, yet those conclusions were not carried forward into the text of the EIR. Your commission should ask why that is so. This underscores the content bias of the EIR preparers, a firm that we understand was not even on the county list of approved consultants, but for which Granite sought and received a special exception to import them to draft this EIR. A firm with no evidence of having the type of specialized qualifications needed to deal with this kind of historic resource compared to the over 200 years of specialized experience on the Pechanga cultural team, as shown in the distributed credential handouts. Here, there is no expert on the other side to even argue that there's a disagreement among experts. The tribe is the expert on their culture. As you have heard so many times during these hearings, this was an environmental document written to justify a project in a pre-selected place, not a document to accurately disclose impacts, try to fairly mitigate them, or to find the most suitable location for this project. After our testimony today, the tribe's concerns can no longer be swept under the rug. We assert that the Commission has sufficient evidence before it to deny the quarry, but not to approve it. In conclusion, all told, this equals a seriously broken CEQA document and CEQA process requiring repair and recirculation, should this Commission consider recommending approval in any form, which we believe you should not. As you heard from the tribal chairman, in the end, there is no way to meet tribal interests and approve this quarry. The cultural impacts alone are unmitigable and unconscionable. If you say you stand with the tribe, your community, or our shared environment, there is no way you can recommend approval of this quarry today, next week, or next year. We thank you for your consideration, will be available for questions, and respectfully request a modest sur-rebuttal period at the next hearing, since the applicant and the county did not present on cultural resources at any of the hearings or staff reports, and we believe it's only fair for us to have an opportunity of sur-rebuttal. Thank you very much.
Looks to me like you've skated. I don't see anybody up here that wants to even ask you questions.
As a compliment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Well, so much for that. Okay, Commissioner Snell.
Of our county staff on the assertion that information was provided that would have led to a conclusion that this would be a significant historical site. Is that true, or were you involved, or?
Yes, I'm the county archaeologist, and I've been involved in consideration of cultural resources for this project. Could you rephrase your question so throw down?
The speaker made an assertion that information was provided about the significance of the site, and that could lead it to be a historically significant site or some other designation, and the county disregarded that. Is that true?
That's not accurate, no.
Okay.
Staff has required the typical consultant or technical studies for cultural resources. We've had two different consultants, cultural resource consultants, who are on our cultural resources consultant list, participate in the consideration or the inventory and evaluation of potential resources on a project. And copies of those reports were provided to the tribe for review and comment. We've kept in communication with the tribe throughout this process. And we believe that we have followed all of the requirements, industry standards expected for this kind of consideration under CEQA.
Was there another consultant involved on Granite's behalf?
There were two consultants involved. The first one was McKenna et al., consultants who did initial survey work back in 2007, I believe. Again, it did some additional survey work in 2008. And then the county brought in another study, or the applicant selected another consultant to do additional survey work and to reevaluate sites that were identified by the first consultant. Would you like me to go in in-depth explanation of what the results now?
No, that covers what I was wanting
Okay.
to find out about. And both of them were already on the list, or was
Yes.
Okay, so that clears that up. And then do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. You will be hearing from Anna Hoover the responses to comments to the tribe's substantial comments on the draft EIR, and the response from the EIR preparers was, nah, we respectfully disagree. It's not a historic resource. And you'll also be hearing from Laura Miranda about the nature of the consultation. It was more a staff-to-staff on an archaeological report, and we'll give you 3 days turnaround to review it. There was no consultation on mitigation measures. There was no consultation on impacts. The one meeting we did have, you will hear in the summer, we were supposed to have between the tribe and the county, which is what government to government is. It's between the governments. We had an unexpected drop-in visitor, which was Mr. Johnson, and I believe Mr. Darris from Lilburn. So the tribe was unable to have substantive discussions about these cultural resource places in the TCP with the applicant in the room. Interestingly enough, the county, after our last planning commission meeting, did contact us, and they do want to meet. We have a meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow morning up in Riverside. We asked them to come to the reservation because I believe that your tribal liaison and archaeologist has not ever been liaisoning on site with the tribe at its cultural resources facility. So I think that there is a disagreement about the nature of what has gone on, and you will hear more about that from the other people testifying.
And then on the characterization of what's being reviewed, I got the sense from the chairman when he spoke to us that a big part of it is their oral history and not necessarily artifacts that are found on the site. And I wonder if the county considers that same evidence, or if it's only based on what's found on the site.
The county is required under CEQA to consider archaeological resources. It is specifically called out as archaeological resources. We do that using the current industry standards in doing archaeological work, and that's why the two different consultants have participated in doing technical surveys and providing us recommendations. We have followed all the typical protocols that we would normally do for any project that needs to consider cultural resources. And we are confident that we have completed and met the intent requirements of CEQA for what we must consider.
And that is evidence found on the ground?
Precisely.
Okay. Thank you.
May I respond to that through the chair?
I may.
Yeah.
Okay, I would respectfully disagree with that. I think that Ms. Moroquan's characterization of that is sort of not exactly what full cultural resource management, CRM, does. You very wisely recognize that cultural resources are more than physical archaeological sites. They can be a wide range of historic properties, and that's why you're going to be hearing Dr. Woodward talk about the National Register Bulletin 38 on traditional cultural properties, written by Dr. Tom King, who happens to be our consultant, who happened to put part of that landscape on the National Register 40 years ago. There's a lot more to this story than just archaeology on the ground, and we are very pleased to finally be here today to be able to walk the commission through how we see this area, and it is totally based on the oral history of the tribe that has been passed to them over thousands of years, and is as credible, if not more credible in many ways, than archaeological guessing about what physical things mean.
Anna Hoover. And you will have 8 minutes to find your folks back. We're going to find out whether the Pechanga are more persistent here. Haley Torres? Haley? Okay, got you. How about Hannah Torres? It might be close anyway. Austin Tinsley? Okay. You got your 8 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Anna Hoover, culture analyst for the Pechanga Band of Luiseno Mission Indians. I'm a professionally registered Riverside County qualified archaeologist with 15 years experience in archaeology. 4 of those years have been with the tribe. Regretfully, Dr. Thomas King, technical consultant to the tribe, is not able to be here, but it is my honor to read his testimony before you today. Dr. King has worked in cultural resource management, historic preservation, and environmental impact assessment for the past 45 years. He is a nationally recognized expert in cultural resource management, the author of 8 textbooks, 1 trade book, and 1 novel, and is currently teaching and providing consultation assistance to the Department of Veteran Affairs and various other clients. Dr. King is also the co-author of the National Register Bulletin 38 on traditional cultural properties, which you should have received a copy of today. Honorable Commissioners, I regret that I am unable to participate personally in this hearing, but hope these written comments will be of use to you. Back in 1972, as a graduate student at UC Riverside and head of that university's archaeological research unit, I nominated what we call the Marietta Creek Archaeological Area, a small part of the landscape within which the Liberty Quarry is proposed, to the National Register of Historic Places. For reasons that I've detailed in written comments on the Liberty Quarry Environmental Impact Report and elsewhere, I understand that area and the proposed quarry site to be part of the expansive landscape that holds tremendous cultural significance to the Luiseno people, which we have come to call the Luiseno ancestral origin landscape. I want to make a few points about this historic property here today, most of which are elaborated upon in my written comments on the EIR. Let me begin with the National Register and the California Register of Historic Resources. Each is simply a list of places that someone with relevant knowledge has concluded are historically, culturally, architecturally, or archaeologically significant enough that they ought not to be destroyed without a serious consideration of alternatives. The California Register is modeled on the National Register, and what is eligible for the national list is also eligible for the state list. Both registers are the inventions of Euro-American society. They have their roots in a list compiled in early 19th century France of old buildings that revolutionary leaders thought ought not to be demolished, even though they were associated with the hated and overthrown aristocracy. Such lists have come to be relied upon by governments as indicators of what is culturally important on the ground, but they are very imperfect instruments. I, for one, do not believe that American citizens, whatever their ethnic and cultural backgrounds, should have to prove to government that the places they value meet criteria devised by government professionals before government will consider the impacts of projects on such places. Such consideration ought to be a fundamental right of citizenship. But for better or worse, eligibility for the California and national registers has come to be the standard for consideration in planning under laws like the California Environmental Quality Act and NEPA. In the 1980s, the U.S. Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, which advises the President and Congress on historic preservation matters, and for which I worked at the time, became concerned about the fact that federal agencies were ignoring their impacts on places that Americans valued for cultural reasons, but that did not happen to be important to archaeologists or architectural historians. The council charged its staff, that is me, Tom King, with drafting guidelines to help adjust agency attitudes. The result, after a good deal of interagency squabbling, was a 1990 publication of the National Park Service called National Register Bulletin 38 on traditional cultural properties, now commonly, if unfortunately, called TCPs. A TCP, according to the bulletin, is a place that is eligible for inclusion in the National Register because of its association with cultural practices or beliefs of a living community that A, are rooted in that community's history, and B, are important in maintaining the continuing cultural identity of the community. In the 20+ years since publication of Bulletin 38, many places important to tribes have been found to be eligible for the National Register as TCPs. Many of them are expansive landscapes because such landscapes will quite naturally figure prominently in Native American tradition. The Zuni Salt Lake in New Mexico is one example of such a landscape. The Medicine Highlands in Northern California is another. While an archaeologist can recognize an archaeological site based on his or her training, and an architectural historian can evaluate a venerable building based on the technical standards of his or her profession, the only way to identify and understand a traditional cultural property is by consulting with those who value it, in this case with the Pechanga Band of Luiseno Indians. I have been privileged to do this in recent years, not as much as I would like to, but enough to appreciate their beliefs about the landscape. As I have explained in written comments on the EIR, there is no doubt in my mind, based on some 45 years experience with this kind of property, that not only the Marietta Creek archaeological area, but the entire Luiseno ancestor origin landscape is eligible for the National Register, and hence for the California Register as a TCP. The Pechanga Band has made that perfectly clear to me, and has tried to make it equally clear to you and to the writers of the EIR. Astoundingly, however, the EIR authors seem to think that they can make it not eligible by simply saying it is not, without a shred of evidence to support their assertion. Over the years, I have seen a lot of irresponsible pieces of garbage masquerade as environmental impact analysis, but few match the Liberty Quarry EIR in this regard. Back in 1972, my colleagues and I nominated the Marietta Creek archaeological area to the National Register. We were not thinking about association with cultural practices or beliefs. We were not considering the continuing cultural identity of the Luiseno community, with whom, as far as I can recall, we never communicated. We were archaeologists, trying to keep the California Department of Transportation from wasting a very nice complex of ancient Luiseno archaeological sites, and in this we were modestly successful. But archaeological sites are really only part of the picture. As I understand it to be viewed by Luiseno people, and particularly by the Pechanga Band, the archaeological area, more properly referred to in the Luiseno language as Temecula, is part of a cohesive, somewhat expansive landscape dotted with specific places of cultural importance. And that landscape is important as a totality, not merely as a collection of points. The Liberty Quarry, if permitted, will blast a big hole in that totality. As I understand the tribe's point of view, this will cause the landscape to die, with dire implications for those who live in the vicinity. The tribe is understandably concerned about the impacts this will have to the ancestor spirits who they believe live in the landscape and to the Pechanga people living today. I think their beliefs and concerns are matters you should carefully consider before making a decision about the project. Commissioners, the EIR preparers would try to guide you into thinking that just because no physical archaeological resources were identified within the mega mine boundaries, that no cultural impacts will occur from the project, and that all cultural resource impacts can somehow be mitigated by archaeological monitoring alone. The tribe knows that recorded and unrecorded habitation sites surround the mountain. The tribe also knows that some places are too sacred to casually use on a daily basis or for utilitarian purposes. The tribe urges you to consider the possibility that there is a reason no physical resources were identified during the archaeological survey, precisely because of the sacredness of this mountain, which lies within the larger TCP. I thank you for your time.
Looks like you skated. Let's try it. Hey, Raymond Baskets Jr. And let's see if we got your folks here. Let's see. Andrew Briscoe? Andrew? Oh, Andrew. Okay, thank you. Rania Villalobos? Okay, thank you. And Raymond Vasquez Sr., you got your dad involved in this. Okay, thank you. You have 8 minutes.
My name is Raymond Vasquez Jr. I'm a member of the Pechanga Indian Reservation. I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to come and speak to you today and share with you a little bit of our history through our cultural creation story. I'm employed by the Pechanga Indian Reservation. I have been for about 10 years now. My boss is in the room. I love my job. I'd like to say that it is a good spot to work, and I've learned a lot while I've been there. On behalf of my friends and people here, I'd like to hope that some of the things that I tell you today can humanize me and our people, and so I share with this in the hopes that you will relate to some of the things that I'm getting ready to tell you. On behalf of my father and my mother, Anita, my grandfather and my grandmother, Arthur and Francis, my great-grandfather and grandmother, Juan and Josefa, my great-great-grandmother, Viviana Kapahapish, my great-great-great-grandfather, Loriana Kapahapish, I thank you for allowing me to speak today. In the beginning, our people were created, all things, in the Ekva Temeku. Ekva meaning sandy place. Temeku meaning place of the sun, sandy, sunny place. Tukumit and Tamayawut, the father and the mother came together, and they made all things, the earth and the sand. And then they joined, and from that joining was created all things. The winged, the four-legged, the two-legged, the stone, the water, the fog. And these original creations of this joining was called the Kamalam, the original people. Now the Kamalam were born into darkness, and Tumet was given to them, the sun. And Tukumet and Tamayawut instructed them how to create a net, and they flung the Tumet up into the sky, and that gave light to all people to see. Now there's renditions and examples of this creation story in the hills surrounding the Ekaba Temeku. There's nets in the sun on the stone pictographs and petroglyphs that you might visit along the way. While this was all happening, Wiot, the greatest of all the Kamalam, was being born. And he had the knowledge of how to make tolvish, our white clay food, which all the Kamalam ate. Now, this was one thing that he liked to do, but also he was able to teach our songs and our dances to the Kamalam, and they were all happy about that. Unfortunately for Wiot, he had a wandering eye, and one day down by the river, he saw a beautiful Wahut, and she was dancing next to the stream behind the reeds, and he became enamored with her. And she was a very powerful witch, Wahut, and he lusted after her. And unfortunately for Wiot, one of the powers that she had was the ability to see into the minds of men, and our plot thickens. Wahut also was very, what is that word, vain. And so she enjoyed the fact that Wiot was looking at her in that lustful manner. And so she teased him and danced up and down the river edge. Finally, she dove into the river, and her true self was revealed. Wahawut, the frog woman. Her rear end was exposed because of the waters parted her hair. And Wiot saw this vision of ugliness in the frog woman, her scales and her green legs, and he became disgusted. And Wahawut, the frog woman, being able to read his mind, became incensed and mad. And so she witched him with her power. Now, Wiot, being powerful himself, was not killed instantly, but he became poisoned by this witching that Wahawut had done to him. So he began traveling along the Temecula Valley. And as he was traveling, he was naming all the places, and you'll see some examples of that in later presentations because our fire still burns, and we still have these names in our archives in the Cultural Resource Department. While Wiot was traveling, he became a great leader and a father, even stricken with poison, to the Kamalam, and he continued to teach songs, and he continued to provide Polish, the white clay. But while he was traveling, he also kept a chronograph of his travels, so the Payam Kawicham calendar was created. Payam Kawicham is the word that some people use to, or I use, to refer to our people, the Atahu, the Luiseno. It's not my name. Payam Kawicham. So as he traveled to all the different areas, and the Kamalam were following along, and they were learning all these beautiful songs. Finally, after they got past the Marietta Valley, the Marietta Hot Springs, they arrived at the hot springs in Lake Elsinore. And finally, Wiot succumbed to the poison that Wahawut, the frog woman, had given to him, and he died. The Kamalam, seeing their leader dead, their great father took him back to the Ekva Temeku, the beginning place, and they burned him. and the camelon, the roadrunner, and the quail, and the other animals. They cut their hair, and they saw they were grieving over the loss of their leader. Will was gone. They burned him. Someday, if you see me walking by the mall and my hair is gone, you won't ask Raymond to make it a fashion statement. You'll know that somebody near and dear to me has passed away, now that I've told you the story. Unfortunately, the people grieving at the loss of their Wiot, they didn't know what to do. Wiot saw this grieving, and after 3 days, he was resurrected from the spirit world. He flew up into the sky and became Moila, the moon. Moila Wiot is still here today to comfort the people. When I look up at the moon, I get a nice comfort feeling, and I enjoy that moonlight, and that's Moila Wiot revealing himself so that the people would still enjoy his company. Unfortunately, Wiot took the gift of Polish with him, so now they had to convene a grand council up in the hills where the Liberty Quarry or this Temecula mega mine is going to go, and the Kamalan Pomki at the House of the People. This council was convened, and they bickered for many days to find out who it was that was going to become food. William took the food with him. He took the recipe. So as they bickered and they complained, finally it was decided that shukat, the deer, would become food, and that is to this day. Shukat is food for the people. From then, the people dispersed out into the lands of the Temecula again. And I'd like to thank you for allowing me to share this little bit of our history with you. Unfortunately, I guess it was necessary to bring to you our creation story that you probably had never heard before. However, I'm sure you may find some similarities in other stories. Thank you. Wamnoambi, poeta, Oshuno.
The only question I would ask you is, during the tour with Mr. Ram of the sites, we started from the Temecula City Hall, and there's a pond there. I was curious as to how accurate that pond is to your story. I think there's a net there and some acorns and other miscellaneous items.
Those are renditions of our creation story. Any place that you see pictographs or petroglyphs of netting and the sun in the sky, that is part of our history. And again, Paul will show you, by example, Mr. McCarroll will show you all the place names that we still have to this day. So thank you very much for your time, sir. I appreciate it.
And thank you, sir. Lisa Woodward. All righty, let's check to see whether the folks are here. Thomas Long. Okay, thank you. Lucas Reyes. Thank you. Amber Steen. Thank you. John Tinsley. Thank you. 10 minutes, ma'am.
Adjust it all. Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Woodward, and I'm the archivist and researcher for the Pechanga Tribe's Cultural Resources Department. I hold a PhD in Native American Studies from UC Davis. I'm also a co-investigator of the J.B. Harrington Database Project, housed at the Native American Language Center at UC Davis, which was funded since 2001 by multiple grants from the National Science Foundation. I also serve as a board member for the Temecula Valley Historical Society. The traditional boundaries of the Peomcowichim, and let me explain, I know Raymond used this earlier. Peomcowichim is a Luiseno word for, it means the Westerners. And they're also known as Luiseno in ethnographic material. The Peomcowichim encompass all of western Riverside County and northwestern San Diego County. The name Luiseno was given to the indigenous people who were associated with Mission San Luis Rey. The Peomcowichim are comprised of 7 bands: Saboba, Pechanga, Paula, Palma, Rincon, La Jolla, and San Luis Rey. All 7 bands share the same language, traditions, and history collectively identify Ekpa Temecula as the birthplace of the Peomcowichim. The first account of the Peomcowichim creation narrative to appear in print was recorded by Father Geronimo Boscana, who served at San Juan Capistrano Mission from 1814 to 1826. Father Boscano's manuscript, which consists of 16 chapters of ethnographic information about the native people residing in the mission, is believed to be the earliest detailed anthropological account of any of the Southern California indigenous people. His manuscript includes a creation narrative from the people who resided inland from the San Juan Capistrano mission. Boscano recorded the following, quote, "The account for the creation of the world from those in the interior states, the first fruits of their union were earth and sand, after which were produced rocks and stones of all kinds. Trees and shrubbery followed, and next thereafter herbs and grass, and again animals, principally the kind in which they eat." At the turn of the 20th century, anthropologist Constance Dubois interviewed Luiseno people from La Jolla Reservation and the Potrero Indian community about their traditional beliefs. Dubois recorded 2 versions of the creation story as told from the content of song texts. One version states that after the Kamalam traveled away from their birthplace, quote, "they returned to a place called Temecula, Temeco, and this place people now call Temecula, for the Mexicans changed the Indian name to that." Another version recounts when death was introduced to the world, the first people, quote, "had a big meeting at Temecula, where they were still together, for when they found out that death had come into the world, they did not know what to do, and they discussed the matter," end quote. In 1908, Dubois published a 117-page article entitled "The Religion of the Luiseno Indians of Southern California," in which she provides additional versions of the creation, many of which state the birth of the world occurred at Ekba Temeku. As part of her research, Dubois made over 70 sound recordings of songs which contain the teachings of the religion as well as the social rules and values of the Luiseno people. Lucario Chavez, one of Dubois' main consultants who was born at Mission San Luis Rey, recited a detailed account of Luiseno creation and said in the beginning the people got together in a place near Temecula. Dubois explains in a footnote, quote, "It is a place that can still be seen. The rocks and trees are all around in a circle. The stones are left there in groups of 3s just as they use them for cooking their food, and heaps of ashes are found there," end quote. This place, she describes, is Ekba Temeku. 20 years later, John P. Harrington, a linguist and ethnographer employed by the Bureau of American Ethnology, collected approximately 20,000 pages of field notes on Luiseno language and culture. On August 25, 1932, Harrington took a road trip with Josefa Verdugo, who lived at the old Luiseno village of Awanga. Verdugo pointed out place names along what is now Highway 79 South. When they reached Temecula, she said, quote, "The Indians lived across the river half a mile from the highway on the sloping flat that rises from the river. All stories mention Ekba Temeku as the first place for starting everything," end quote. A barely legible hand-drawn map of the Temecula and Elsinore Valley was located in Harrington's microfilm field notes. I contacted the Smithsonian's National Anthropological Archives, where Harrington's collection is housed, and they sent me a scan of the original map. After reviewing it, I realized Harrington did not create it. It is not his handwriting. I presume a Pechanga person drew it. Although there is no date on the map, it more than likely was created for Harrington during his visits to the valley in 1925 or 1932-33. This map is of particular importance because of the detailed and thoughtful information contained on it, which independently corroborates the oral history of the tribe regarding place names and their locations in the Temecula region. The yellow arrow on the slide indicates the general area of the proposed Liberty Quarry project. Excuse me, I'm also suffering from a cold. In 1933, ethnomusicologist Helen Roberts visited Paula Reservation and recorded 10 songs sung by Flora Pahanam, who was from Pechanga. The first 2 songs are entitled Un Canto de Temecula, and Roberts states, quote, "Number 1 was a song of Temecula, a place in Luiseno territory, a little north of Paula. Its old name was Temeku. Flora said that the song told about those who were naturally born at Temeku, meaning the original people who emerged from the darkness underground." These few examples of cultural information collected by non-Indians and academics represent close to 200 years of published and unpublished documentation about the Luiseno origin story and the importance of Ekba Temeku to the culture. However, this information does not thoroughly represent the traditional knowledge, but it complements what is still passed down through tribal songs and practices. The May 2009 ICF Jones and Stokes archaeological report prepared for the County of Riverside contains an appendix consisting of an ethnographic study conducted by Stephen O'Neill. He incorporated a substantial amount of ethnographic information about Luiseno cosmology, including some of the sources discussed above. When the EIR preparers responded to the comments provided by the tribe, they singularly referred to O'Neill's addendum report for rebuttal. Furthermore, only particular passages from O'Neill's report were incorporated into the response to comments, while his overall recommendations were not included. O'Neill suggests that the area in and around the project site is a TCP, and he incorporates several quotes from Dr. King's Bulletin 38, which is discussed earlier by Anna Hoover. O'Neill states on page 4 of his report, quote, TCPs by definition are those places regarded as significant by the community involved. The strength of a property being designated a TCP rests finally on the community's knowledge and association with it. That is, their say-so. Without the community's direct involvement, in this case, that of the tribe and its members, this report can only suggest that places in the project area might be regarded as traditional cultural properties by the local Native American community based upon the descriptions recorded by anthropologists in the past and a hopefully adequate understanding of Luiseno cosmology as to what would be regarded as significant, end quote. O'Neill goes on to state on pages 55, 56 of his report, quote, the suggested TCP district generally includes the confluence of the Temecula and Margarita Creeks, the head of Santa Margarita River, and portions of Santa Rosa Plateau and Rainbow Canyon. While the fullest possible extent of the proposed district cannot currently be ascertained, it is clear that much, if not all, the Liberty Quarry project area could fall within it, end quote. These recommendations were not included in the final EIR response to comments. Instead, the EIR preparers, without explanation, chose to focus on 2 of 7 individual locations identified by O'Neill that are referenced in the final EIR as, quote, the 7 potential TCPs identified by O'Neill. Even though O'Neill identified these 7 locations in his report and assessed them individually, he also suggests, as stated above, that they all could fall within a single TCP district, including the project area. In the final EIR, Pechanga's cultural information and concerns submitted to the county were addressed under F2A, and on page F-63 of the response to comments, the EIR preparers say, quote, the county and the DEIR acknowledge the tribe's extensive history and ethnographic origin, end quote. In spite of this, they go on to state, quote, the county respectfully disagrees with the tribe's characterization of the area in and around the project site as a TCP, end quote. In closing, the EIR preparers reviewed these 2 reports using a buffet-style approach, picking and choosing the findings that best supported the project instead of incorporating the overall recommendations of the archaeologists, ethnographer, and most importantly, the tribe. The information provided by the tribe was not even considered in the FEIR, even after 2 reports urged further consultation. Page 41 of the ISC Jones and Stokes report states in reference to the 7 individual locations identified by O'Neill, quote, because time constraints did not allow for these resources to be relocated with the Native American community, it must be noted that the locations plotted here are based on a review of ethnographic literature, and as such may not provide accurate boundaries as would be identified by tribal representatives. In order to determine the integrity of each location and the potential district as a whole, consultation with the tribe must be undertaken, end quote. The DEIR and FEIR blatantly disregard these recommendations and totally dismiss the comments submitted by the tribe. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Commissioner Petty.
This might be for the speaker, or it might be for one of our staff members, perhaps Leslie. I'm interested in the quote about one of the applicant's consultants said that they respectfully disagree with the tribe's characterization as a TCP. Who's responsible for that quote, and are they here to defend it?
Get up close to it.
I would need to refer to or defer to our EIR preparer for that.
was added to the EIR as a collective effort between the county staff, the EIR consultant, and our county council.
Well, that was helpful. Was it sat around in a committee or something? And,
Quite literally, yes.
and the decision was made at a senior staff committee level or EIR staff committee level?
It was indeed. We had the county staff, the EIR consultants, and county council met repeatedly throughout the course of the composition of the response to comments, and we did it all collectively as a group to ensure that what was in there was the voice of the county and the consultants as well.
The information presented here today change your mind about that decision?
Maybe I should jump in on this a little bit. The information that you've just heard from the various representatives of Pechanga is not disputed. It's recognized as their oral history, their traditional perspective of their cultural history. We do not disagree with that. In following CEQA, the studies that we required require looking for evidence of archaeological resources, those cultural resources of an archaeological nature. That's why the studies were conducted. That's why potential sites originally identified were reevaluated and subsequently evaluated as not being of an archaeological nature. CEQA cannot be for things that are within the realm of cultural history without being tied to some sort of physical direct evidence of an archaeological nature. In looking at Bulletin 38 and in that let's get my copy out here. And this is prepared by Dr. Tom King, who Pechanga's representatives have been referring to and read from his letter. The National Register is not the appropriate vehicle for recognizing cultural values that are purely intangible, nor is there legal authority to address them under Section 106 unless they are somehow related to a historic property. The technical surveys that we had conducted on behalf of doing the CEQA process were looking for evidence of historic properties, whether they're archaeological, but it needs to be something that can be recognized using the current industry standards in conducting archaeological work. And so nothing was found on the property that was deemed to be of an archaeological nature. And so we were not conducting NEPA evaluation on this property. We were not conducting Section 106 analysis for National Register eligibility or determination. We're conducting CEQA. And so I think what we are dealing with is tangible evidence of archaeological cultural remains that could be identified, evaluated using the industry standards in professional archaeology work, as opposed to the oral history, cultural history presented to us by Pechanga representatives from their perspective. In dealing with this at a staff level, doing what we customarily do in evaluating and considering cultural resources, we asked for additional information from the second consultant involved to explore with the tribe, and they subcontracted to an ethnographer. This is the Mr. O'Neill that they referred to attempt to get more information about this from the tribe to see if there were specifics within the project boundaries that we needed to consider. The ethnographer apparently had difficulty in accessing tribal information, and therefore fell back on that literature that was already established in published literature, professional literature. So all of the information that was submitted to staff, whether it came from technical studies, whether it came from sub-consultants with specific tasks to seek information, or whether it was information that was provided to us by the tribe through communications, consultations, meetings, all form of communications, has been considered. We have, through design, the buffer to the north was put into place to pull back the edge of the quarry so that sites of cultural concern to the tribe off-site to the north would have somewhat of a buffer area. But there's no archaeological sites that could be found within the boundaries of the project itself that would provide direct evidence of archaeological resources that we could deal with and therefore mitigate under CEQA.
Because what I'm wondering is, I mean, we have original field notes based on first-person interviews, more than 100 years old, with maps. Are we that linear that we have to go find something on the site?
We deal in archaeological, evaluation of archaeological resources with things that are tangible. We have a difficult time in doing CEQA work with things of an intangible nature without something tangible to support them. And we did not, the consultants doing the surveys did not find that tangible evidence. We are limited to mitigations and things, how far afield off-site that we have authority to deal with. We are not disputing the concept of a TCP as being appropriate for that general area. There's no dispute there. It's how do we deal with it within the project boundaries, especially when there was no physical evidence of an archaeological resource found there.
But I mean, the map that was shown in those original notes seems to me that would kind of rise to that occasion. And if we agree that the TCP is appropriate, then how do we mitigate that?
Well, we don't have a copy of the map at the county, and so I don't know how we would mitigate
But
that.
if we did,
And it may not be mitigable under CEQA.
Yeah, that's my point. I think, yeah, or, I'm sorry, if Courtney wants to respond.
If I may briefly, through the chair, with all due respect to the county's archaeologist and tribal liaison, I think that reflects a very old school view of what's required under CEQA and is not up to what the current industry standards are, at least in the places and the tribes that I work with, where very large TCPs have been determined to be an historic resource under CEQA, and efforts have been made to mitigate, but the number one form of mitigation is avoidance. There are alternatives here. And the notion that CEQA somehow only deals with archaeology, I would just have to point you to the Public Resources Code, section 21084.1, dealing with historic resources and substantial changes to those, and the CEQA guidelines 15064.5, determining the significance of impacts to archaeology and historic resources. And that is the section that takes you into dealing with any object, building, structure, site, area, place, record, or manuscript which a lead agency determines to be historically significant or significant in the architectural, engineering, scientific, economic, agricultural, educational, social, political, military, or cultural annals of California, may be considered an historical resource, provided the lead agency's determination is supported by substantial evidence in light of the whole record, which undeniably you all know in your hearts and minds that's what you've seen today. And I'll go on here. Generally, a resource shall be considered, shall be, by the lead agency to be historically significant if the resource meets the criteria for listing in the California Register, which includes the following. The California Register is modeled off the National Register. Bulletin 38 is a technical advisory to the National Registry. There are 4 criteria this can fall under, and the tribe believes that it could fall under many of these. It could fall under A, which is associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of California's history and cultural heritage. Tribal values places, with or without the archaeological component to them, we've had listed on the National Register under that criterion. There is B, associated with the lives of persons important to our past, Wayut. The others you've heard, those are people important to the past of the people here, the original people of Temecula. And under D, number 4, has yielded or may be likely to yield information important in prehistory or history. That whole property up there has not been archaeologically surveyed, if you want to get technical. They said, oh, the slopes were too steep, we can't get in there, et cetera, et cetera. So I submit that under CEQA, the kinds of things we're talking about are clearly to be considered. And just because you might not be able to mitigate the tribal cultural values doesn't mean that you don't consider it, that you sweep it under the rug, that it's inconvenient, that the applicant is upset about it. That's not the law. That's not what the law says. And then you need to make a statement of a variety of considerations that 99 possible jobs outweighs devastating the tribal religious practices of the Pechanga and other Luiseno people. That is the burden of proof.
One follow-up, and that is Mr. Vasquez kind of analogized to kind of a Western Garden of Eden example. Do you think that's an appropriate example? Is there something that you can kind of drive the point home to the Western mind of what that, or Anglo mind, if you will, of a similar analogy?
It's an excellent question, and that would be wrong for me to comment on that. I am the tribe's consultant expert attorney on matters of CEQA. I am not a tribal member. I'm not a practitioner. But you will hear the answer to that very question when the other members of the tribe and Paul Macaro give testimony to that, so that will be coming. I don't presume to be the expert, unlike others.
Well, Mr. Forrest.
Does the designation of an area as a TCP preclude any development on it?
I'll try to.
Sorry.
Who are you addressing, sir?
Either 1, 2, county, and then Ms. Hoyle?
Ms. Coyle. Go ahead.
Commissioner Forrest, the county does not have any policies or guidance on how to deal with TCPs.
Precedentially speaking, has that happened?
We have not dealt with this issue before, at least since I have been in my position.
Ms. Coyle, are there any properties in Temecula, around Temecula, Pechanga tribal land, which has been designated TCP, where there has been development?
I will defer to my counsel on the second part of that question, but I can answer the first one about the TCPs. Anything that goes on the National Register, that doesn't mean that it can't be destroyed tomorrow. That's the sad fact of what the law says.
I didn't ask if it was going to be destroyed. I asked if there has been development on TCPs.
I think the answer would be that there already has been extensive development on tribally significant cultural properties, including the TCPs, including, I believe, where we're sitting today in this church. And again, Paul Macaro will speak
Where
to
were you being considered?
Well, I'm very happy to be working with the tribe now. I think one of the problems, and you're kind of understanding a little bit of this today, is that the CEQA process for too long has been held tightly by archaeologists and others in tribes who mostly deal with the federal government on things, are more familiar with NEPA, and oftentimes they weren't very familiar with CEQA and how to integrate their interests into the process. And then you have people in the agency saying, you don't belong here, we don't need to talk to you. So I think for too long, bad decisions have been made or decisions made without all the information. And I think this might be one of the first times that this tribe has ever come forward and actually been saying no to a project.
My next question was going to be then, has the tribe, after designating an area, a TCP, on its own developed it?
I would have to defer to the tribal attorney on that.
Okay, because if that's so, then I'm having a hard time, or I would have a hard time understanding your criticism of a TCP designated as such, and Liberty Quarry's desire to develop what they're going to develop. Has the tribe itself done that? For example, is the casino on such an area? Any area in Temecula? And why did it happen?
Well, I'll let somebody else deal with the tribal development issue, but I can speak to the recently repatriated lands from BLM that are right across 6 football fields away from the boundary of Liberty Quarry. There is an MOU in place between the tribe and I believe Fish and Wildlife Service and BLM that land be monitored and protected by the tribe for its cultural and natural values.
Okay, and when the tribe's representative answers, what I'm trying to develop is you educating me about what a TCP is and your criticism on it with regards to Liberty Quarry. My job is to, as best as I can, determine if there's an impact that by CEQA is not being mitigated. And I need to understand the nexus between a TCP and my decision on that. Does that make sense?
I'm trying to understand it, and I will think about it in the next week as well. I don't know if Ms. Miranda wants to add anything about that. But another key component of listing on the National Register is integrity. And as you all know from being here, much of the land on the east side of I-15 has already been impacted by the very projects you're talking about.
I'm kind of playing the devil's advocate here. I'm going to tell you that I come from the 4th District in Coachella Valley, where we have some tribes, and I've seen some of the development that has occurred on what I'm assuming now, without absolutely knowing, that they are TCPs, but they've served the various tribes' interest in order to develop.
And I can't speak to any other tribe, but on the west side of the I-15, there's incredible integrity that's still there. And that is one of the things the tribe is very interested in biologically, culturally, that they want to see protected.
Hold on just a minute.
I'm gonna.
I know who you are. I just wanted to ask a question related to the previous speaker. Are you going to answer Mr. Boris now? All right, well then go ahead.
Laura Miranda, tribal member and tribal attorney for Pechanga. The Pechanga tribe has never destroyed a TCP on its own property.
Destroyed.
And I'm sorry then.
We're having a semantic difference here. Have you developed the tribe on areas that you've designated as TCP?
No. We've actually taken great strides not to do that. Our cultural department is actually a lot more stringent on our own lands than we are on outside lands.
has the city of Temecula developed on properties that you've designated as TCP?
That we consider to be tribal traditional cultural properties, yes.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, there was some talk about the entire area, and I assume it was the entire area that was on, quote, the map, versus 7 individual parts being TCPs.
Right.
What is your interpretation of that?
There were 7 potential TCPs identified by Stephen O'Neill, the ethnographer. So in regards to that comment, it was on the 7 that he identified. There was 2 of the 7. There was 2 identified by the county as being potentially or close to the project area, and actually 1 is not that close.
Okay, but what do you consider to be the TCP? Is it the entire area covered by that map? Or
Yes.
is it just 2 of the 7, or some of the 7, or all of the 7, or what?
I guess there's been maps submitted that identify those areas.
A 100-year-old map?
No, current maps. That base information from the 100-year-old maps. But it's a large area.
Is there any map that you can provide in an exhibit that shows us what
I
that
believe there'll
area
be
is?
some images in future presentations of these areas.
And Mr. Chairman, the Tribal GIS Department, in consultation with the Cultural Department and the Tribal Government Council, put together a confidential map that was submitted with our draft EIR comments. And so the county has had that for, oh gosh, when did we write this letter? November 23rd, 2009. And it's a map, attachment A, map of Luiseno ancestral origin landscape, confidential, not for public review, because under the Public Resources Code and the Government Code, these kinds of places are exempt from public disclosure because of their sensitivity, and no one wants people to pot hunt and desecrate them. And it is a map that was developed based on the oral histories, based on the ethnography, and it shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, kind of 6 areas as a TCP. So you have that, and I would encourage the commission to ask its county council to see this map, but understanding that it is a confidential map.
Are they a subset of the overall TCP? Then that was what I'm getting at, is trying to figure out what's a TCP and whether these 6 or 7 or however many you like to count are part of a greater TCP that includes all of the Luiseno, lands, or what?
It is. I can't really describe it more than you and I maybe sitting down and looking at the map, which
I'm familiar with,
which we're happy to do.
your sense of confidentiality, and if Ms. Clack wishes to look at it, she can look at it, maybe tell me whether she agrees with it or doesn't agree with it or whatever it is. I don't need to see it.
And again, Mr. Paul Maccaro is going to be describing these areas that he's aware of that reflect this map in much better job than I could do. But I just want to let you all know that since November of 2009, this map has been in the possession of the county, but they've chosen not to consult with us on it, despite our requests.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, too.
I have a question.
Wait, I'm sorry. Commissioner Snell?
First for Ms. Marquand, you mentioned that the north setback was established to give more distance between what county understood to be culturally sensitive sites to the tribe. How did we know that that's significant or sensitive to them?
I believe it was actually biological issues that prompted the 400-foot setback buffer area. But it was also thought that it would serve the dual purpose to pull back quarry activity from the property line and then from the proximity of those places of tribal concern to the north of this project.
So to know that the tribal had concerns, we had to have some discussions.
There have been discussions.
Okay. It's not clear from what all the statements are that there was any. And then I have a question on the maps that were included. I forgot the guy's name, but they were in his notes. One version was totally illegible, and then there was another one that popped up that was clear. And so I'm trying to figure out if you could explain to me what the difference between the two maps are.
This map is actually the version that's on the Harrington's microfilms collection. So this is the more accessible version that's at the local university's UCR. So I actually requested a scan of the original, which is housed at the Smithsonian, and they sent me this clearer map.
Okay, so that's produced from the original.
Right, and these are all public documents. Harrington's notes are in the public domain.
Okay, thank you.
Have you provided staff with copies so that we can receive that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think we're almost finished with you. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I noticed it's almost 4:30, and we thought that we would be going in the morning. So I just want to say that we had a number of tribal members here, some of our youth, and I know that many had to leave at 2, and many more need to leave at 4:30. And they were some of our contributors to our donated time. So I don't want to take up that valuable time now, but I would like for the rest of our presentations that we've referred to and you've asked questions about to actually be heard in their entirety, even if these people have already left. I don't know that they have, but if they have, that's an explanation as to why then we will need to cut short our presentation, and maybe we could present the remainder at the next hearing.
County Council.
Just following the rules that the commission has set up for its hearings, the person needs to be in attendance at the meeting to be able to yield its time to the speaker. If the person is not here, they cannot yield their time.
I would suggest you maybe try to round up someone else in the interim if you can do that. Okay, hold on. Okay, Laura Miranda. Carlos Sandoval? You here, Carlos? Thank you. Alicia Burchis? Alicia? Okay. Michael Murphy? Thank you. Robert Villalobos? Okay, thank you. Ms. Miranda, you have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Laura Miranda.
Sorry. Ms. Miranda. Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering if we can assist the tribe, because I would like to finish the tribe's testimony today. So in assisting the tribe, people who are available to lend time raise their hands so that the tribe members can take a look around and get appropriate time for their respective speakers. Okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
All right, we're going to take your testimony from Ms. Miranda, and then we're going to take about a 5-minute break. We're going to take this rest of this stack from the Pechanga and see if we can verify that the people are here, or if they want to get somebody else to do it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Laura Miranda. I'm a member of the Pechanga tribe and a tribal attorney who has been practicing in the area of cultural resources preservation for 13 years. I was the lead tribal expert on Senate Bill 18, the California Sacred Sites Bill. I have conducted numerous trainings throughout California on the implementation of SB 18, specifically with regard to appropriate tribal consultation. I did these trainings with the State Office of Planning and Research since the bill was implemented. During my previous position of Deputy General Counsel for the Pechanga tribe, I was lead counsel for the tribe on this project prior to the release of the draft EIR. The applicant's assertion that quote-unquote significant consultation was completed for this Temecula mega mine project is flatly incorrect. First, the county skirted its government-to-government obligations on this project and left those duties, including its communications with the tribe, to Jones and Stokes, its environmental consultant, a third party. Second, the county never completed a full in-person consultation meeting with the tribe prior to the publication of the draft EIR or the final EIR. Third, the county's own expert archaeologist and tribal liaison never met with the tribe concerning this project, even though we expressed the concerns of the tribe numerous times in writing, beginning with the issuance of the notice of preparation. The project applicant claims that the table on page F14 of the final EIR proves that consultation with the tribe was completed. First of all, none of the communications represented in this table include an in-person consultation, government to government, between county officials and tribal officials. All of the communications referenced in this table concern our discussions of the procedure and protocol for tribal involvement with respect to the archaeological surveys only. None of the communications referenced here concern discussions regarding potential mitigation measures or solutions to address project impacts. Arguably, the heart of consultation discussions should include these. Let me walk you through some further specific examples of the county's failure to complete consultation with the Pechanga tribe. In May of 2009, the tribe was asked by the county archaeologist if we wanted to engage in consultation after the completion of the archaeological report, and we stated we would like to do that. We then requested information we would need to engage in these consultation meetings, copies of the proposed mitigation measures and solutions for cultural resources, and copies of the final archaeological assessment. The tribe was flatly denied access to this information. We were told the county could not release draft mitigation language, and we were told that the county was only interested in the tribe's comments on the archaeological assessment. We were then given 3 days to submit comments on the archaeological report, an impossible time frame for the tribe to meet. And on top of all of that, the tribe was never even provided a copy of the final report in order to respond within that 3-day given time frame. I would also like to take exception with a comment that was made by Ms. Moraquan, where she alluded to the fact that the O'Neill, the individual that was charged with putting together the ethnography, could not obtain information from the tribe. And that's flatly incorrect. What the tribe decided to do, rather than have another person, a third party, tell our story and our ethnography and our history, we decided to submit our own ethnography prepared by our own experts rather than to have O'Neill tell our story. So it wasn't that we were unwilling to provide him with information. We provided an alternative solution to provide the information to the county in a way that was respectful of our culture and our sovereignty. When the county finally did draft mitigation measures, they attempted to lift them from a completely different type of project in a completely different jurisdiction, the annexation in the city of Temecula. In fact, during a phone conversation that I had with Mr. Johnson at the beginning of 2009, I explained to him how the annexation mitigation measures would probably not work for this project, primarily because the annexation did not contemplate specific ground disturbing activities, but left those issues for later environmental review processes, unlike this Temecula megamine, which obviously has massive ground disturbing activities. What ended up as the final mitigation language for cultural resources isn't the same language as the annexation, even though the applicant continued to claim it was. Another prime example of failure to conduct government-to-government consultation. We are further disappointed because the tribe believes we have a good relationship with the county when it comes to addressing project impacts to cultural resources. But here, Riverside County Planning did not follow standard process with the tribe, unlike Ms. Morriquan is claiming. It's as if a completely different procedure was invoked by the county for this Temecula megamine project. In July of 2010, the county planning finally did attempt an in-person meeting with the tribe after the environmental document was published. Unfortunately, as Ms. Coyle referred to earlier, the applicant, the county planning allowed the applicant to crash the meeting without any notice to the tribe. The applicant simply showed up in the middle of the tribe's presentation to county representatives, thwarting a cornerstone of proper consultation, respect concerning the confidentiality of culturally sensitive information. After this meeting, this failed meeting, the tribe continued to request further meetings. And as recently as April 25th, 2011, in a written correspondence to another one of the tribe's requests, the Riverside County Council stated, quote unquote, consultation has already occurred. However, interestingly enough, now that we are halfway through these planning commission hearings, the draft EIR is published, the final EIR is published. The county planning department is now agreeing to meet with the Pechanga tribe. Presently, this meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. It still remains to be seen whether the appropriate county staff and experts will be in attendance and whether the sensitivity of our information will be respected. Lastly, it is still unclear whether SB 18 consultation is required for this project. If the project requires a general plan amendment, either in Riverside or San Diego County, this would trigger the SB 18 law. It is critically important to address this issue as soon as possible because SB 18 requires consultation prior to the adoption of any general plan amendment. Even if SB 18 is not required, it contains a process on consultation that are best and standard practices that most agencies, including the County of Riverside Planning Department, have used in the past and continue to today since the law was passed. But again, here, they did not use those tenets of consultation. These tenets of consultation include defining consultation as the meaningful and timely process of seeking, discussing, and considering carefully the views of others in a manner that is cognizant of all parties' cultural values where feasible, seeking agreement. Another tenet is that consultation is to be between the government agencies, not a third party, and the tribes, and shall be conducted in a way that is mutually respectful of each party's sovereignty. And the third important tenet is that consultation should also recognize the tribe's potential needs for confidentiality with respect to the places that have traditional tribal cultural significance. These are also the components that the California Native American Heritage Commission encourages lead agencies to abide by, and again, which we have found the county planning department to normally abide by, but in this case, they did not. They did not follow any of these standard consultation practices. The result of this inadequate consultation is overwhelmingly disappointing. The EER preparers have discounted and written off my tribe's birthplace as insignificant, even though, as Dr. Woodward has explained, we provided them with a detailed ethnography proving the significance of our creation area by citing to not only our own oral histories and songs, but to published credible academic sources, including those from the Smithsonian Institution. The EIR preparers failed to comply with the requirements of CEQA by not performing the required analysis under the historic property section of CEQA, as Ms. Coyle has explained to you. The EIR preparers drafted inadequate mitigation measures that do not take into account the cultural significance of our ancestral origin area, but primarily focus on the question of whether there are physical archaeological resources present, an aspect that would necessarily be lacking because of the sacredness of this place. In closing, the Planning Commission does not have an adequate environmental assessment to support approval of this mega mine. Proper tribal consultation was not completed, and the legally required analysis pursuant to CEQA is missing. We respectfully request that you vote to deny the mega mine. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Hold on, John. Any council?
Just to provide additional information for the commission, the project before the Riverside County Planning Commission is an SMP, a change of zone, and a noise ordinance exception. There is no GPA or specific plan before the Riverside County Planning Commission. Therefore, an SB 18 consultation is not required for this project. Meetings and discussions that needed to take place between the county and Pechanga needed to take place in order to comply with CEQA. And I think planning staff as well as our county archaeologists can go into detail as to how many meetings and discussions took place between county and Pechanga in order to comply with our CEQA requirements. I wanted to provide this additional information for the commission in your consideration.
Thank you. Commissioner Snell, did you have a comment?
No, I have a question.
Okay, question will do.
The ethnology issue. So when Stokes and Jones approached the tribe, at that time you prepared it and gave it to them? Or when did that?
Yes.
Or did you even do it?
Yes.
Okay.
We did prepare a detailed ethnography. It went through a great process with our tribe because it was the first time we had actually put some of this information in writing. It was a big decision for the tribe, but considering the ramifications, we believed we needed to do that. We were approached by O'Neill wanting to interview certain tribal members and wanting to gather information himself and write our history himself. And we chose to go ahead and, because we have the full expert staff, to do that ourselves and submit it to the county. And it was timely submitted.
And from what you've seen in the record, was it used?
No, and I think that Ms. Coyle and Ms. Woodward have testified to that as well, that again, we believe a sort of cherry picking of information was done, and what ended up as the conclusions in the final EIR were not our recommendations and not even your own experts, the county planning's own experts' recommendations either. O'Neill's ethnography that he did end up writing as well, because he went ahead and did one on his own and then we did one, so you actually had two, and information in both of those were summarily dismissed.
Was O'Neill's report completed before he received, and did he receive your ethnology?
I don't know the timing of what came first, but yes.